You scoop white sugar into coffee, and it disappears like a magic trick. Twist the lid off a soda, and sweetness is already waiting, cold and obedient. You don't climb for it, you don't bleed for it, and it definitely doesn't come with wings. Now take that kitchen away. Dawn. A hungry camp. The fire from last night still coughs smoke into the air, and every stomach is loud enough to vote. Steve squints up at a dark opening high in a cliffside hollow. A hive. You can't see the honey, but you can smell it, and you can see the bees flickering around the entrance like static. A kid stares up at the cliff the way you stare at a vending machine when you're broke. Same hope. Different consequences. Sweetness is right there, and it's guarded by height and a few thousand angry insects. In this world, dessert is a high-stakes energy gamble. Fall wrong, and you don't just lose a snack, you lose a climber. Steve ties a cord made from plant fiber and gives it a hard pull. He tests a foothold. The rock doesn't care that he's hungry. So when did ancient humans first start eating sugar? That question sounds simple until you realize the first sugar wasn't a bowl of crystals. It was rare, seasonal sweetness, sometimes easy, often hard-won, and sometimes dangerous. And the answer changes depending on what you mean by sugar. The everyday sweetness modern life hands you, or the scattered sweet calories ancient humans had to chase. Your commute can be miserable, but at least your sweetener doesn't try to sting you. Before Steve climbs, what is his brain actually chasing when it screams sweet? And did that craving start with honey at all? Steve's group crowds close as a woven pouch gets opened like its treasure. Inside, a few bruised berries, a fibrous sweet root, and a smear of honey saved from a lucky day. The kid reaches in, licks a finger, and his whole face changes. Shoulders drop. Breathing slows. For a second, the world feels safer. That reaction is why the adults argue. Someone wants the ripe fruit patch, because it's easy calories if nobody else has stripped it first. Someone else votes for digging more of those sweet tubers, because they last longer and don't fight back. Another person pushes for marrow, rich and steady, but not sweet. The berries are tiny, scattered, and gone in a minute. The honey is the jackpot, but it can cost blood, stings, and a fall. Why would ancient humans risk injury for something sweet, and what exactly counts as sugar to the body? Here's the trick. The brain isn't chasing dessert, it's chasing fast energy. Sweet taste is an old cue that usually meant energy-rich carbohydrates. In a lot of omnivores and primates, that preference shows up because it's useful. And to your body, sugar isn't only what tastes sweet. Starches can get broken down during digestion into glucose too, turning a chewy root into the same basic fuel signal. So the craving can be older than Homo sapiens, and broader than honey. If first sugar means sweet calories, it starts deep in evolution, even in infancy with milk sugar. If it means refined crystals, that's a much later human invention. Today, that sweet alert is like a low battery warning that never shuts up, because modern life keeps handing you concentrated sugar all day. If sweetness is this ancient and this broad, why can't archaeology just point to the first time ancient humans ate sugar? Where's the receipt? Steve's group goes to sleep with sweet on their hands. They've wiped the sticky mess on grass, rubbed it into dirt, and tried to pretend it's gone. Then a quick burst of rain spits out of the dark, hits the fire ring, and turns yesterday's ash into a thin gray soup. By morning, ants are everywhere. Not because anyone left a label or a wrapper, but because sweetness still whispers to anything that can smell it. And yet the place where they ate, it looks almost clean. So when did ancient humans first eat sugar? Can we name a date? A place? A first meal? No, you can't date the first sweet bite. Fruit rots into nothing. Honey thins, dissolves, gets carried off by insects, or washes away in one storm. Sweet plant juices dry, vanish, and leave no neat line in the soil that says someone enjoyed it. That's the basic problem in ancient history, and the history of sugar. Archaeology almost never finds sugar. It finds side effects. A tool edge with wear that suggests cutting or digging. A smear of residue that might be plant or animal. Tiny scratches on teeth. Bits trapped in dental calculus. Maybe a picture on rock that hints at what people valued. Each clue helps, and each clue has limits. Modern people leave receipts for everything: apps, barcodes, delivery histories. Prehistoric humans didn't. The most valuable sweet foods can leave the weakest direct traces. So instead of hunting for a first date, we follow the first durable signs that ancient humans were targeting concentrated sweetness on purpose. If sugar itself vanishes, what's the first strong clue that humans were doing that? A flame flickers, and the rock starts to move. Not the stone itself, but the shapes on it, as your eyes adjust and a wall turns into a message. There's a small human figure painted high above the rest, stretched out in a climb. A line runs down like a rope or a ladder. Near the reach of that hand, there's a tight cluster of marks that look like a buzzing cloud. Below, other figures wait, gathered like a team that knows how this ends. What's the earliest surviving sign that ancient humans chased sweetness like a target, especially honey? This kind of prehistoric rock art is one of the first durable clues we have that people weren't just stumbling into sweet foods, they were planning for them. In places like the Spanish Levant, there are famous images often interpreted as honey gathering, someone climbing, bees nearby, and a group on the ground. Across different regions, other artworks have been read the same way, and broad summaries sometimes place these honey and bee themes somewhere in the wide span of roughly 40,000 to 8,000 years ago. But it's visual evidence with interpretation. The wall doesn't label anything. Those marks could be bees, or they could be something else. The climber could be after honey, wax, larvae, or just a safe place to grab. And even if it is honey, the painting can't tell you whether this was the first time anyone ever tasted it. Still, one thing comes through clearly. Steve's climb isn't random. It's a repeatable strategy worth recording. Sweetness mattered enough to become a story people kept. Today, sugar is a grocery item. Back then, it was important enough to paint like a risky heist. Art can hint at behavior, but can we get harder proof than drawings? Something you can test in a lab? A cotton swab drags across a rough pottery shard like someone cleaning a stain that happened thousands of years too late. Under the bright bench light, the surface looks dead and dry. But the point of this work is that clay is a sponge. If ancient humans cooked, stored, or smeared something inside a pot, tiny traces can soak in and stay there. That's the problem with sweetness. The actual sugars, the part your tongue cares about, don't last. Honey's glucose and fructose dissolve, break down, and vanish. If you're hoping for an ancient taste test, archaeology doesn't hand you one. So can science detect ancient sweetness when the sweetness is gone? What's the strongest testable evidence for bee products? The answer is yes, sometimes, but not by chasing sugar. Researchers go after what survives. Lipids. Waxes and fats are stubborn molecules. In the lab, residues are extracted and run through instruments that separate chemicals into peaks and patterns. And sometimes, a pottery shard produces a signature that is hard to fake. Beeswax lipids. That matters because it anchors bee product exploitation in a way paintings and stories can't. In parts of Europe, the Near East, and North Africa, beeswax residues absorbed in pottery show up from at least the 7th millennium calibrated BC. Then the map gets bigger. In Nigeria, knock-related pottery has also yielded beeswax evidence around 3,500 years ago. Not the earliest globally, but a major data point that says this wasn't just one region's trick. And here's the complication. Beeswax doesn't automatically mean people were eating honey. Wax could be from processing comb, sealing a container, waterproofing it, storing something valuable, or using it like an adhesive. Back at Steve's camp, someone smears something sticky inside a container. Dinner, storage tech, or ritual. Modern jars brag 100% honey. Ancient containers don't. Chemistry can tell you bee products touched this. It can't always tell you why. If ancient humans were using bee products this early, the next step is obvious. What happens when humans stop hunting sweetness and start growing it? What plant changes the whole game? Hands reach into a thick, wet edge of field and snap a green stalk with a clean crack. The air is warm enough that everything smells alive. Someone bites down, strips the skin, and chews. Sweet juice floods out. The tough fibers don't. They get spat to the side in a little pile that says, "This is food, not dessert." This is Steve's descendants, but the rhythm of life has changed. They're not betting their day on whether fruit is ripe yet. They're not rolling dice on a beehive that might cost them blood. They're standing near patches they can return to, and the sweetness is waiting where they planted it. When does sweetness stop being a lucky find and start becoming something humans can plan for? With agriculture and domestication, and especially with sugarcane. Domestication history is messy, and the early evidence can be hard to read. But many models put the deepest roots of sugarcane in New Guinea and nearby Southeast Asian histories. Some reviews suggest an early horizon around 8,000 BC. However it began, The early use was likely simple. Chew the stalks, or crush them and drink the pale juice. A child gnaws a cane piece like it's a treat that never runs out, while adults bundle stalks to carry home. That's the change. The distance between wanting sweet and getting sweet shrinks. Reliability rises, effort drops, and once sweetness can be grown, it can be stored, traded, counted, taxed, and scaled. This is the ancestor of always available. Chewing cane is sweet, but it's still tied to the plant. So, when did humans learn to turn that sweetness into portable crystals? A wooden spoon keeps circling a pot that won't stop steaming. Sweet juice trembles at a boil, then gets louder, thicker, darker. Someone stirs so it doesn't scorch, waiting for the moment it stops being a drink and starts being a substance. This is the moment sugar escaped nature's limits. When did sugar become the white crystals we recognize? And what did that do to the ancient sweet tooth? Not in the Stone Age. Ancient humans could find sweetness, but it came with strings, seasons, fiber, hard chewing, long walks, or angry bees. Here, the strings get cut one by one. Boil the juice until water leaves. Keep going until it turns to syrup. Pour it out to cool. As it rests, tiny grains appear, then multiply. Crystals you can scoop, dry, store, and move. Sweetness becomes portable, tradable, countable. A crop turns into a commodity, carried along expanding networks, with early sugar-making traditions often traced in broad histories to South Asia, especially India, without one neat birthday for the idea. Now jump back to Steve, hanging over a cliff for honey. Then jump forward to a fridge door opening. The same brain that once risked a swarm now meets sugar with no cliff, no season, no sting. Just a lid and a craving, and the fizz is the new swarm. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for future videos.